I will readily admit when I fuck up. And with that, we're live. Sorry, we're about 13 minutes late from the start of the program, but I was playing a video game and time kind of got away from me. That's my fuck up. Jewel writer Eli Moonstar might get here sometime in the near future, but until then, I'll have Pinky introduce himself.
Hello, guys. This is Picking Off from Video Game Facts. And I just got here from eating my dinner
All
because I
right.
wasn't sure if I'll be able to make it today.
But he made it. He made it. And of course, it's me, Mr. Red Fox. Like I said, we might be joined by other people as the time goes on. But anyway, let's get this party started. So I know some big news came out this week. You know, PlayStation, to the surprise of no one, Sony's coming out with another PlayStation. Once again, offering a whole bunch of promises that will probably not be filled because, I mean, they're like, yeah, we're going to go 8K and it's going to be like 140p, and I'm like, yeah, you guys can't even, like, we can't even get solid 1080p games right now, so I'm not really trusting 8K, 2K, 4K, any of that shit. And Nintendo dropped their 3.0 Smash Brothers update with a new character and some new features and all that cool stuff. We're not going to cover that. That's going to be for Saturday's podcast. So that we'll actually have something to talk about Saturday. Today, this podcast, the Midweek podcast, is all about the best and the worst. The best 3D platformers, the best games and the worst games, and we went by genre. So we've got 2D platformers, 3D platformers, JRPGs, Western RPGs, fighting games, beat 'em ups, sports games, racing games, puzzle games, strategy games, got 2D action titles, 3D action titles, first-person shooters, and oddball, which is just like a catch-all for shit that doesn't quite fit any of those genres. So, which do you want to do first, the worst or the best?
Let's see. We could go with the worst.
Okay, we'll do the worst first. Okay. So I guess we should start with 2D platformers. I have a list of my top 5 worst 2D platformers. First one's Alfred the Chicken. This game's been on multiple platforms. It's been on the Game Boy, the NES, the SNES. It's kind of a weird game because, you know, up until that point, generally speaking, if you wanted to defeat enemies, you jumped on them. Because you learn that from Mario. If you want to defeat enemies, jump on them. Even Sonic the Hedgehog kind of jumps on enemies to take them out in the 2D games. Alfred the Chicken's a little bit different because Alfred the Chicken's attack is that basically you have to jump in the air, but you don't just jump on enemies. He has to dive bomb them with his beak. But they don't tell you that when you're playing the game. Like, there's no tutorial. So the first time I played this game, I spent a lot of time avoiding enemies and dying horrifically because I didn't know that you could actually defeat enemies just by pecking them to death. So for me, it's one of the worst games, 2D platformers. The other one is Lester. What?
Lester the Unlikely.
Lester the Unlikely. This game isn't that bad within and of itself, but because the first time I played it, like the game is one of those games that's really ambitious, but the execution isn't all the way there. So, like, the whole premise of the game is that Lester starts out as a nerd, a comic book obsessed nerd who sneaks into a boat, like a carrier boat that has his favorite comic, and he's like reading the comics like before they get to the stores. So he's like, you know, first, you know, he gets a sample before it reaches anything, falls asleep, winds up, like, the shipwrecks, and he winds up on this island, and he's a nerd and he's afraid of everything. Like, the beginning of the game, he sees a crab, he runs away from the crab. He sees a turtle. Like, as soon as he gets near a turtle, he starts like walking all a shit, like scary cat and shit like that. But the thing is, the game gets better once you get far enough into it. But the thing is like, the beginning of it is so rough and so tough that most people would never experience that. So it's like a failure of the 2D platforming aspect. But once you get past the first 3 levels of the game, and it gets a lot better. But like getting past those 3-4 levels is just a motherfucker. Third worst 2D platformer is any of the Looney Tunes platformers aside from the 2 made by Konami. Like the one
Bug's Birthday Bash.
Yeah, those are just bad. Like they're just like Duck Dodgers. They're just really bad games. They're not good. They're not well made. Pardon me. And then the Lemmings 2D platformers, they're just really kind of weird. And the last one is Little Big Planet. Just all 3 of those games have really bad platforming.
People actually like Little Big Planet because of the whole stage building.
Yeah, people like the stage building, but the thing is, at the end of the day, a 2D platformer lives or dies on its physics, right? Does the physics, does the jumping and running and getting around feel good? If the jumping and running and getting around and like the movement, if the movement sucks, then that platformer, I don't care what the other shit involved with it is, then that's gonna kind of suffer. And so, like Little Big Planet, whether it's the first one, the second one, the third one, like the core of it, the physics of it is so shitty that it just destroys my enjoyment of everything else about it. You know.
I mean, don't they build levels built around the game's platforming physics?
Yeah, well, I mean, typically you do, but the thing is like a big thing like of a 2D platformer is the physics engine. So basically how it feels when your character jumps. Like, okay, let's say you're playing Donkey Kong Country or Super Mario 64, even Sonic the Hedgehog. There's a certain feel that everything feels like when you run, when you jump, when you traverse the environment. Like, and that should be smooth and there should be weight to everything, but not so much that you don't feel like you're playing a game. Little Big Planet doesn't have that. Little Big Planet's jumping is very floaty. The physics is very forgiving, which is good. But I mean, the game is built as a platformer. Like it's platforming, and platforming needs to be more well constructed than what you have in Little Big Planet. So as a content, like people, oh, I'm creating all this content. That's cool. That's awesome. But at the end of the day, it's also a platformer, and the platforming needs to be better. And it has it like 3 games, each one the same shitty the same physics engine for the platforming. And I'm like it's really like, for me, some people can forgive it. They can play those player-made levels, and it's like, oh, that's awesome. For me, it just doesn't feel right because I've played so many 2D platformers that I know what good ones feel like and what bad ones feel like. You know, I'm going to use the pizza analogy. Once you've had good pizza, it's really hard to go back to shitty pizza. Or you've had like a really good donut, not that you'd eat them all the time, but once you've been someplace that makes really good donuts and you had one and you're like, this is good, I'm good. It's really hard to go back to really bad donuts. It's like, I got some Dunkin' High. I mean, not some, what's like a local Hostess. I've got some Hostess donuts. It's like, no, I'm good. Like once I've had really good donuts, I don't want to go back to Hostess. Not that Hostess is bad, but whatever. But yeah, that's my worst 2D. You want to go with your worst 2D?
Let's see. There's so many bad 2D platformers. Thanks to watching AVGN's videos, it's hard to make a proper top 5 worst platformers list because it'll usually involve like movie or TV based tie-ins.
Those are so easy, you know. It's so easy to go with those. I basically have no movie based things in here because it's too easy, you know. And I hate going with the too easy route because it's too easy. Like, you know, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That's too easy.
Like, for example, Fantasia for the Sega Genesis.
Yeah, that's a bad game. But most of these are games that I've played. Like, I didn't go with what other people said. These are my own personal experiences. So, like, you know, you can put a game that was a 2D platformer, like, this is, like, you could say, oh, the Lion King for the 16-bit generation. Those platformers suck. Those Disney platformers that were based on movies like Lion King and Beauty and the Beast, they're terrible. They're ass. They're hot buttered ass.
Right. And unfortunately for me, I actually put the worst 2D games I played were movie-based tie-ins like Toy Story on the SNES and The Jungle Book for the SNES. Other than that, I haven't played any actual bad 2D platformer games.
You're lucky. So I guess we can move on to 3D platformers. So my list is 5 once again. Most of these you should know. Sonic 06. Hate that game. Like, if that game was a person, I would throw them down a flight of steps and say, "You're too slow."
And there's mostly 3D, but that's too easy.
Yeah, well, it's on my list because I played that game. And the reason I played that game isn't because I wanted to play that game, but because I went to my friend's house who had a PlayStation. And he's like, "Man, you got to play this." This is before the N64 came out. Like, that was one of the launch titles for the PlayStation. Was Bubsy 3D. And I was playing this game. I was like, "This game sucks." And then I got my N64 like later on that year, and I was playing Mario 64, and I invited him to my house, and we were playing Mario 64, and he was like, "Yeah, Crash, Bubsy 3D sucks." This is the same friend who also had Crash Bandicoot 1 and was like, "Yeah, Crash Bandicoot's awesome." It's on my list. First of all, Crash Bandicoot isn't really a 3D platformer, but I put it on here because they marketed it that way, even though it wasn't. And Crash Bandicoot 1 is just mediocre, but for the amount of hype surrounding it, I put it on the list because, like, it's just not that good as a 3D platformer. And because in comparison to its competitor, which, I mean, it was made to compete against Donkey Kong Country, but I don't even think it's as good as Donkey Kong Country. But when you compare it against what, like, Sony after a while tried to compare it against, which is Mario 64, it's not as good a game as Mario 64. So those are 3 games. The last 2 are Cameo, Elements of Power, which is a 3D action platformer made by Rare, but after they left Nintendo. That game was going to be for the GameCube, but then they were bought out by Microsoft. And I mean, frankly speaking, it's not very good. Like, this was when Rare was starting to go downhill, so you could tell because it's not a very good thing. And the last 3D platformer that I'm just like, fuck this game, was Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts.
I don't think I consider that a platformer since it involves custom vehicles.
Well, I had to call it a platform because that's what people were expecting when they heard a new Banjo-Kazooie game was coming out, was that it was going to be a 3D open world platformer. It was not that. And the platforming, what's most egregious is that the platforming in the game sucked balls. like they put so much effort into getting the vehicles to work, and they don't really work all that well, that everything else kind of suffered. And the game looks great, but that's the only thing you can say about it, is that it looks great. Like, it doesn't play very well. The premise kind of sucks. It's just embarrassingly not what it could have been. And frankly, we're never going to get a good Banjo-Kazooie game from Rare as it is right now. The closest you're going to get is Yooka-Laylee, made by people who used to work at Rare, but like the more talented people who left that shithole of a flaming dumpster fire on a garbage barge company under Microsoft. So like, the game itself isn't really like the worst 3D platformer, but because of what people were expecting and what people were used to, like if you compare it to Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo-Tooie, like Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts is such a step down that it's just like you can't not put it on the list. Any 3D platformers where you're like, well, fuck this game.
Let's see. For my list, I have to go with the original Crash Bandicoot. Now that I played the whole trilogy, that game has not aged well.
Yeah.
And I had to, and forgive me, I also have to put in ukulele as well.
All right. Okay. I mean, look, the lists are subjective, so you can do whatever you can put whatever you want to on there.
And SpongeBob SquarePants: Revenge of the Flying Dutchman, the game that put its developing studio out of business.
THQ?
No, not THQ, but the developer the studio that developed it. THQ was just the publisher.
Okay. I mean, isn't that the same studio that also made those Tak and the Power of Juju games?
No, it wasn't.
Okay, I was wondering. Because those were actually pretty good little platformers. I mean, they weren't perfect, but they were nice little 3D open world platformer things. At least to me, I liked them. Okay. Anything else in your worst?
Shadow the Hedgehog.
Man, I was gonna put that on the list, but like Shadow the Hedgehog is so memeable that I can't. Plus, I think Shadow is a more interesting character than Sonic the Hedgehog. Like, he has a more interesting backstory. He has cooler abilities.
I disagree because due to the rule that we had to poke fun of edgy characters.
Yeah, but Shadow the Hedgehog kind of deserves to be edgy. I mean, if you follow his backstory, he was basically created to be to destroy the world. He chose not to. Like, he kind of, the one person that he loved died on him. It's kind of okay. That's kind of cool. I mean, whereas Sonic's backstory is just kind of stupid. Okay, I was an experiment for Dr. Robotnik, and I got special powers, and I can run fast. Woo.
I think that's from a different canon.
I mean, well, there's like 3 different origin stories for Sonic the Hedgehog. There's the Archie Comics canon, which was heavily inspired by or it inspired one or the other. The really awesome Sonic the Hedgehog TV show that was much darker in tone. Yeah. And then there's the original canon from the game where, which was what I just said, where he was an experiment from Dr. Robotnik. He got really fast and now he's fighting against the man, basically. And then there's the new one where it's like, okay, Dr. Robotnik always existed, and he just started fucking mechanizing the animals, and Sonic's like, not this time, motherfucker. And so now he's fighting along with his homeboy, Miles Tails Prower, and they're sticking it to the man. Personally, I prefer the original because that's the oldest. I know they retconned it with that darker, Dr. Robotnik took my parents and he's got a mechanized empire and all that shit. But that's a little too dark for me.
Let's see, that's 4 of the worst 3D platformer games I played. So I just have to think of one more.
Well, you don't, because, I mean, if you don't want to. Let's see, what else? You don't have to. You don't have to.
I guess that's about it then.
We can move on to JRPGs, the worst. This list is much easier for me because I've played so many. So number 1 is Final Fantasy 13 of the worst JRPGs I've ever played. Final Fantasy 13 was like, RPGs aren't like, typically they aren't the type of game where the entire game is a joy. There's going to be moments where you're just like, fuck, right? And then there's moments where you're like, wow, this is great. And not like a platformer. Like, platformer will have some moments where it's like, oh shit, this is kind of hard. But RPGs are going to have an ebb and a flow. You know, there's going to be mountaintops and valleys, right? Final Fantasy 13, that whole game feels like you're in a valley. Like the whole game is just a slog to get through. And for that, it's on my list of one of the worst JRPGs ever made. The second one is Paper Mario Sticker Star, because that game is barely a fucking RPG. Like, just barely an RPG. Just kind of it's barely an RPG. And compared to the other games in the series, it's an embarrassment. I know it sold a lot, but if you bought that game, and I'm one of them, if you bought that game thinking you were getting an RPG and you played it and you liked it, what the fuck is wrong with you? Next, Legend of the Stars. It's a SNES RPG that had a really good premise. Like, you have two groups of heroes, and they each have their own unique skills and abilities, and you basically have to switch between the two groups in order to solve puzzles. The problem is that the gameplay interface, the systems, the encounter rate is so abysmal that, like, you go 3 steps, you run into another random battle. It's insane how many random battles you have in this game. And then my next one is Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. This game isn't bad within itself. I have an asterisk next to this one. It's not bad within and of itself. It's just we should have gotten Final Fantasy V instead of this game. And we didn't. And Final Fantasy V is objectively a better game than this. Like, it's more of a hardcore RPG. Like, you have a party, you have job classes, you have a decent story. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest is kind of like baby's first RPG. It's a little bit more advanced than Paper Mario Sticker Star. And actually, it is more advanced than Sticker Star. So that's what's going for it. And I mean, like, now I'm older, I can appreciate Mystic Quest, because sometimes you want to play an RPG and you don't want to spend 40, 50, 60, 70 hours in it. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest you can beat in like let's say you have a Saturday to yourself, you can spend 4, 5, 6 hours playing that game, get through most of it. So it's nice if you just want to play something a little bit different. But at the time, I was really pissed off about that game, because I was like, I'm offended that you would give us this. So it's on the list, even though it's not really the worst. But what we should have gotten was a much better game. And the last one is the East series in total, because there's so many goddamn games, and there's no overall story. There's no overall storyline being told. It's just a series of adventures. But they all play so, like, the original East games played so shittily that it's just like, what the fuck is this? So that's my top 5. You want to go next?
Let's see. Aside from Sticker Star, there's also Quest 64.
Fair enough.
And that's about it. Mostly due to the fact that I barely play any JRPGs due to time constraints.
All right. Okay, we'll go on to Western RPGs. So I'm going to put this game on the list, even though I pumped hundreds of hours into it. Elder Scrolls V, a.k.a. Skyrim. Now, there's a caveat here. The vanilla game of Skyrim, like, no mods, just straight up Skyrim, that game sucks. I wouldn't put that game on my worst enemy. It's boring. It's trite. A lot of the gameplay systems are, it's very quote unquote streamlined. Vampire the Masquerade Redemption. It's kind of they label it as an RPG, but it's like an RPG light, and it's not very good. Fallout 3/4. Like, Fallout 3 is not very good. It's kind of like it basically, the game feels like Bethesda Studios trying desperately to do what Vigil Interactive tried to do with the original Fallout games, but being shittier at it. Like, just you could see the start of the turn. Fallout 4, which isn't a very good game. Like I know a lot of people. I love Fallout 4. Fallout 4 is trash. It's even worse than Fallout 3. And Fallout 76, which I don't own that game, but I played it at a friend's house, and it is trash. Hot buttered trash.
I was about to mention Fallout 76 when you were talking about Fallout 3 to Fallout 4.
Yeah, and notice these are all like, but this list is dominated mostly by Bethesda because I think most of their games, like I think their earlier games were good, and I think they like the best Elder Scrolls game they've released was Elder Scrolls 4. Like not the best, but like the last good one was Elder Scrolls 4. Elder Scrolls 5 is overrated. Vanilla Elder Scrolls 5. Like here's the thing. Like a game that you can only enjoy by player-made content or mods is not
it's not a good game.
It can't be that good. Like Vampire the Masquerade, once you download the unofficial patches that basically fix up what could have been fixed up had the studio had enough time, that's a little bit different because it's like they were under time constraints. But I mean that's still mostly the vanilla game. Like Elder Scrolls games, like Skyrim, you can't even enjoy that game unless there's mods there. Period. Like,
ouch.
Like the base game is just. So yeah, Fallout 4, Fallout 78, 76, Fallout 3, Elder Scrolls, Skyrim, Vampire the Masquerade Redemption. Those are all trash. And we're joined by Jewel Rider Moonstar.
How's it going, Jewel?
Sorry I'm late, but then again, I think I noticed that you guys were late too.
Yeah, we got started at 7:43, so we just rolled on with it because we're already kind of running late. But anyway, yeah, Western art. We're covering the worst first, so we're getting through the bitter, and then we'll get to the sweet later on with the best.
Okay, but if anything, what topic did you hit first?
Well, we went to 2D platformers, then we did 3D platformers, then we did JRPGs, and now we're on Western RPGs, and then we're doing fighting games, beat 'em ups, sports games, racing, puzzle games, strategy, 2D action adventures, 3D action adventures, and first-person shooters for work. Yeah. So we're almost like a third of the way through, and then once we get past here, we'll be at half. So anyway, fighting games. I mean, I've played some bad ones. Not all of them are bad, but I've played some where I was like, why would you do that? Like, seriously.
Clay Fighter 63 in the third.
That was kind of a good idea, but not really well executed.
And this is from all the experiences that I had with fighting games, so excuse me there.
No, that's okay. For me, I have a list of 5, and they are like, I'm going to keep it real. Eternal Champions. That game's control system sucks. It's hard to pull off moves, and it was once again Sega trying to be different instead of just following what works. What I mean by this is, like, once Street Fighter 2 came out, just copy their control scheme because it's really useful. It's intuitive. It gets the job done. Like, why are you trying to do something different? And Eternal Champions, well, we're going to do something different. And they wound up making a fighting game that fucking sucked. So there you go. War Gods. This game came out for the 3DO and the N64. It's not very good. It's like a shitty 3D fighting game. Mortal Kombat in its entirety.
Wait, really?
Yeah, I'm not. Like, here's the thing, okay? Especially the early Mortal Kombats, because basically Mortal Kombat has, instead of you pressing back to block, you have a block button and a run. Like later on, they added a run button and like stamina, all that shit. I don't think you should have any of that unless you're playing like an overly simplified fighting game. But here's the thing: the combo system in Mortal Kombat is not fucking simplified or easy to get into. Like, it's a lot of dial a combo and memorization. So it's like you have these overly simplified parts of it, but then you have this insane, like, you have to memorize reams and reams of moves in order to understand how to use characters. And that's just fucking terrible. So fuck Mortal Kombat, especially the early ones. Next, Bloodsport. It was a game for the Game Boy and the NES. It's kind of a really shitty 2D fighting game, like really bad. Based on the movie, even though it doesn't have Jean-Claude Van Damme on the cover, which is kind of sad, but whatever. And Powerbot. Powerbot is kind of like a Pokemon clone, but the difference is that when you fight, like you have robots, you can choose like one of 4 robots. You go around the city, it's like a kind of open world thing where you have random fights with other people who have little tiny robots, and you fight each other, and then you get money, which you can then take to a shop to buy better parts for your robot or upgrade, unlock new abilities for your little fighting robot. The reason this game sucks is because while the premise is really interesting, like combining kind of like a RPG type thing with beat 'em up robot thing, the problem is that like there isn't enough depth in the game because like your robots you can only buy like 4 parts for your robots. You can only equip like 2 of them at a time. You can only unlock so many abilities. It's like they intentionally handicap you from really powering up your robot to where you feel like you have a lot of character progression, which kind of sucks. So, yeah. Any bad beat 'em ups for you? I know Jules said. Said
I know I said Play Fighters, though. If anything, the only other fighter game that I could think of that might be in the terrible section would be what was it? Time Killers.
Sega. Yeah, that's pretty bad. Yeah. I'm gonna put Star Wars: Rise of Terra's Kai, but
since Joel already mentioned Clay Fighters, I have to mention another bad fighting / beat 'em up game, Shrek Super Slam.
Yeah, that game's kind of fun if you play it with a group of friends.
And apparently, it has its own competitive scene.
Yeah, if you play that game with a group of friends and every time you lose, you guys must
need some drinks for that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's a drinking game and playing it with your friends and getting drunk while playing it. That's actually a pretty fun game.
And apparently, Red Riding Hood is the most broken character in the roster.
Really? I thought Shrek was with his fart clap.
No, it's Shrek. Shrek is turns out to be one of the worst characters in a bottom tier.
Because he has a large hitbox or whatever.
Yes.
But yeah.
And as well as being slow.
But anyway, yeah. I could have put that on the list, but I was like, no, I'm trying to stay away from movie properties. So next we have, except for Bloodsport, but I mean that game was probably something else, and they just slapped Bloodsport on it because it doesn't really feel like it follows the movie at all. So beat 'em ups, Golden Axe. I know. Golden Axe, a lot of people love that game, but the first one, those enemies gang up on you. You like it's cheap how enemies gang up on you.
I second that. I mean, seriously, give me some breathing room, you guys.
Yeah.
I mean, Final Fight gave me some kind of room, and that's at least before you get to the 4th and 5th level.
Well, I mean, the thing about Final Fight is that, like, the only real cheap boss you meet in that game, even in the arcade version, the cheapest boss you meet in the arcade game is Rolento and Abigail. Every other boss, you feel like, okay, I have a chance. Like, this dude isn't too cheap. There's a strategy. Like, and even the enemies, it's like, okay, this dude's gonna rush me. These dudes throw Molotov cocktails. This guy has a knife. But I mean, I always have a way to counter these moves.
Yeah, but I was about to say that. For me, it would be the only cheap bosses would be some of the bosses of the stage, especially that cop.
Yeah, well, I mean, Eddie the cop is bad, but like I said, it is as long as you stay level with him, below him, like vertically level with him, and he can't get you in his line of sight and shoot you, a lot easier to take down. And you get in close and just knee him a few times if you're playing as Cody or Hager or something. You can take him out. But I mean, like, once you get to like Abigail with that charge attack that he does, that's basically unblockable. You can't kick him. You can't, like, if you try and kick him, he'll hit you in the air. It's like, okay, fuck you, Abigail. But I mean,
I was going to say, you can't even use your super on them?
Well, you can use super, but you lose life every time you use it, so you can only use it so many times. The best way to take him out, if you can, is to hold on to your weapon until you get to him, and then use the weapon on him so that when he charges you, the weapon trumps his charge attack. But it's really hard to do that. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The next entrant is Final Fight Streetwise, because fuck that game. It's really bad. The next one is Barbarian. It's a 2D hack and slash for the SNES that had a really cool premise, but in the execution, it really sucks.
I recommend that 64 fighting game that was supposed to be of. Yeah,
it's on the list of worst. So no, I wouldn't recommend it. It's called Fighting Force, and that's number 4.
I was asking if you recommend that as the worst.
Fighting Force is bad because it's like no one had figured out how to translate a fighting game to a 3D space at that point. Like the first fighting game that went from 2D to 3D that really showed you that you could do a 3D fighting game and it could work was Yakuza for Sega. That's the closest one. And because Yakuza basically said, okay, it's a fighting game, but it's also an RPG / adventure game. So that's how they kind of did that. And the last one is Double Dragon 3, the Rosetta Stone.
I never played Double Dragon 3, but I always had trouble with Double Dragon.
Like the first Double Dragon is pretty good. Even like the arcade version, the NES version.
Yeah, that's the one I know. The arcade variant.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Like the first Double Dragon is pretty good. Because basically the first beat 'em ups, 2D beat 'em ups fall into 3 categories. There is the pure arcade, you're this one guy power trip taking on a whole bunch of dudes thing, like Final Fight. Then you've got more of a slightly more realistic view on fighting, like Double Dragon, where basically, like Double Dragon, why would you get in close and punch someone when you could pick up a sword or some nunchucks or a barrel or a rock or a whip and beat someone to death with a weapon? It's much.
I'm usually having that knocked out of my hands.
Yeah, and Double Dragon, the enemies will pick up weapons because why would you just want to reach in there and have fisticuffs when you could use a weapon? That's more realistic. And also using your special techniques like the shoulder smash and throwing people and grabbing a dude and kneeing him in the face 15 times. Double Dragon was always like that. And then Double Dragon, the first Double Dragon, even for the home port, was okay. Double Dragon 2 was better. And then they did Double Dragon 3, which is just, oh, God.
Really bad.
It's really bad. It is really. I played that game on 3 platforms. I played it on the Sega Genesis, the NES, and the Game Boy, and all 3 of them are bad. All 3 of them are bad because the game is based off the arcade game where it literally, you would enter stores and you had to put in real money, real quarters in order to buy shit. Fuck that. It was microtransactions before microtransactions. Literally, you're putting in quarters to buy stuff for the video game. Or you could grind out money from enemies, but it was more expensive that way. So, you know what? Fuck that game.
Boy, that was beep.
Yeah, that was bullshit. That's why it's Bullshit Busters. So, anyone want to add a beat 'em up to the list that I may have missed or, did put on the list?
I don't got one.
I don't think I've played any bad beat 'em up games in my time.
You're a lucky man, but I have. I took the hit so you guys didn't have to. I played Final Fight Streetwise, and let me tell you something. Jesus Christ. Never again. So then we have sports games.
Oh God, I can't think of any because of anything. I try to evade EA flavor.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of EA on this list. So we've got Madden, any of them. All of the EA Maddens are trash. Fuck them. NBA Live, another EA property. NBA Live is not very good. Yes, I said it. It's not a good franchise. Fuck that franchise. WWE 2K, specifically the 2K brand, because the WWE games, like from back in the day in the N64 era, or even the fourth gen, even the third gen, like they got better over time and they reached a point where they were pretty good. But then 2K came in with their fucking microtransactions, and like you've got to spend hundreds of hours, you've got to spend tens of hours to grind a wrestler to the point where they're competitive.
They're playable.
Yeah, they're competitive and they have a good move set, and it's ridiculous. And that's not cool, especially when back in the day you could create wrestlers in like N64 games and PS2 games that could do all types of cool shit, and you didn't have to do all that grinding. So shame on you, 2K. Next we have Dead or Alive Paradise, which is kind of like their game where it's basically, they call it a sports game, but really it's just scantily clad women wearing beachwear playing beach sports except volleyball. So like that weird Japanese thing where they're balancing on a thing in a pool and trying to bump each other off with their asses. It's like here's the thing. If the game had, eye candy, but it also was a solid game, had good gameplay underneath, I'd say, okay, I'm not cool about the whole scantily clad women. I mean, not that I'm against scantily clad women, but like pixelated fake women that you can't actually interact with just doesn't do anything for me. But then to be a shitty game.
I was gonna say it's like DOA beach volleyball meets Street Fighter.
Yeah,
in the worst way.
That's on my list too. Dead or Alive volleyball. Dead or Alive volleyball is one of the worst sports games ever because, like I said, and I say this as someone who played volleyball a lot. Like I played volleyball in junior high school, college. I played volleyball for like 2 years after I graduated college. Like I used to play the shit out of some volleyball and I was good at it. And I played mixed volleyball where you have a team, women and men. I played, all boys volleyball. I played like a lot of volleyball. I love volleyball and I played it for a long time, and Dead or Alive volleyball fucking sucks. It is hot buttered ass. Okay.
I'm surprised that I mentioned it and it worked.
Yeah, it was on the list. It was at the bottom of the list because that game deserves to be in the bottom, like at the bottom of a toilet about to be flushed.
To be honest with you, I thought EA would take that spot.
No, because the Madden games are technically competent. They're technically competent. There's just no innovation because they don't have any competition. So there's no need for them to innovate or do anything new. But Dead or Alive is not only a shitty. Like Dead or Alive is not only kind of like a shitty cash in, but it's not a good game. Like the general mechanics suck. Anyone want to add anything to the sports category? I know you guys aren't heavily into sports games, and to be honest with you, I mean, there's certain sports games I really like, but I'm not ultra into them myself. But there are some that I love to play.
I hardly play any sports games other than the more quirky ones like Mario Tennis and Mario Golf.
All right, so here we go. Racing games. I have both Project Cars on here because I've played both of them and they are overrated trash. They're pretty, but that's about it. There's nothing else really going on. Nicktoon Racing. I bought that game for the Switch. I thought it was going to be awesome. I'm like, this game could be awesome. And I like
you poor unfortunate beeping soul.
Well, the thing is, like, the game is solid. The problem is that it's a budget title. So it's like there's shit that should be there. Like if the game had a story mode, like a legit story mode, like if they took the route of a Diddy Kong Racing or Crash Team Racing, the game probably would be better. But because you're just racing on progressively on slightly more difficult to race, like with like the same, basically the same track with a little bit more like hazards on the track, like the budget constrains the game from being as good as it could be. So I was hesitant about putting it on the list, but I had to put it on there because I mean it was disappointing because like on one hand I'm happy to race as the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Rocco and those characters from old school.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I'm kind of pissed that
they made a new Nicktoons racing game that's practically worse than the original.
Yeah, it doesn't have all the characters that I would like no Ren and Stimpy. I'm like, what the fuck? No, no Real Monsters. I'm like, come on, man. There's some because I grew up on Nicktoons. It was Nicktoons. You had Toonami, Nicktoons, and late night cartoons for kids. You had Toonami, Nicktoons, and that was it, right? And Disney Channel, but Disney Channel started getting rid of their tunes around the time Nicktoons and Toonami started coming up. So, I mean, that's what we had, and I grew up with this. Like, I grew up with Rugrats. I grew up with Real Monsters and Rocco's Modern Life and and Doug, and heck, even the later stuff like Danny Phantom, which I liked. They ended that show in the third season on this huge fucking cliffhanger, and we'll never get to see the conclusion.
Well, they did actually end. They did end the series, but on a low note.
Yeah, like it was this huge cliffhanger. That's what I'm saying. Where it's like, okay, I don't know where the fuck we're gonna go from here. But aside from that, yeah, the game was, like I said, the game isn't bad within of itself. It's just the disappointment factor of them not giving it the type of budget it needed to be as good as it could have been. But I think it's from Activision, and Activision is known for doing that. Like they'll get like a property, and it's just some low budget bullshit instead of putting the money behind it to make it into something great. And then finally, Hanna-Barbera Racing. Now
that game exists.
It only in Europe, but I played it because back in the day I was heavily into emulation, and I downloaded it onto my EverDrive and I played it. And like, wow, you would think that if someone was going to do a Hanna-Barbera racing game, they would just do Crazy Racers, right? Because they had a TV show where they had the different Hanna-Barbera.
They actually did make a couple of wacky races.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like a wacky racer game. Nope, it's literally just Hanna-Barbera cartoons running around on a track, kind of like Super Rally or something like that. Or off-road racing. It's not very good. The menu system sucks. It's just trash. And lastly, Pod Racer. I hate that.
Oh yeah, that's the only racing game that I should say that I really experienced that made me want to throw my controller. And I played the 64 variant.
Yeah, well, that's the one. That's the only one. Well, I think it came to PC too, but Pod Racer can go eat a bag of dicks. I hate that game.
But none of it can compare to what is considered to be the worst racing game of all time, M&M's Racers.
Here's the thing, Pod Racers. I'd rather race on Mario Kart 8 200cc than play that, and I hate 200cc.
And I don't really like Mario Kart that much, but actually, I be honest with you, I don't like Mario Kart at all. I don't like that franchise. The Nintendo ninjas are gonna come to my house and crucify me. Oh, yeah.
I just throw a tomato.
Yeah, I don't. No. I hate Pod Racer. I fucking hate that game. It's like, of all the racing games you could have done, they could have done a game where you're racing in space, and you're gonna do the Kessel Run. Ha ha ha. That would have been awesome. But instead, no, you get Pod Racer because George Lucas really wanted pod racing to become a big thing. Fuck pod racing. And while I'm at it, fuck the Phantom Menace too. And that little kid who played Anakin Skywalker. That movie is so bad. Anyway, anyone have anything else they want to add to the racing section of the world?
There's that Shrek Swamp Racers game that I played.
You play a lot of movie-based games.
Yeah, but, and I sold it.
you sold it.
Yeah.
I didn't buy. Yeah, no man, it looked bad to me. Okay, here we go. The puzzle games. Tetris 2. I know everyone likes Tetris, but I'm putting it down there because Tetris 2 added nothing substantial except for a bomb block, like a Tetris block with a bomb in it that would explode after a period of time, and that was it. I'm like, this is what you add, like nothing else, just that, and it was in color. So, Sudoku. There's nothing inherently wrong with Sudoku. I just am not very good at it, so fuck it.
Neither am I.
Bubble Bath Babes. Bubble Bath Babes is a game that I recently acquired through certain means. Got the cartridge for it. It's a puzzle game where you have to match different colored bubbles in order to see a scantily clad anime-esque girl. The game is just insanely hard. Like it's got a very high difficulty for a puzzle game. Next we have Pac-Man Tetris. It's basically Tetris with Pac-Man characters in it. So you have to connect the things in a certain way, and then you get a power pellet, and Pac-Man eats the little ghost blocks, and it make a normal Tetramino so that it can break everything breaks. And it's just the game is just not very good. It's a good idea, but just not well executed. And finally, Puzzle Quest 2, because like the first Puzzle Quest, Challenge of the Warlords, is so good, and they followed up with Puzzle Quest 2, which sucks. So there you go.
Well, and if anything, I'm surprised that there's no puzzle. I mean, there's no Tetris RPG. But I agree with you. But I put the entire Puzzle Quest on here because, let me just say, it's so bleeping hard to actually try to figure out which way to go with it. At times when the creatures are so hard to beat.
That's why you level up. You level up your character and you equip good weapons. Once you start getting rune stones and crafting stuff, get enough money to build up your citadel, start sieging cities. Like once you start to level up your character, and you like sometimes you have to grind because it has a lot of RPG aspects. So
I was going to say that I find it hard to grind levels because the creatures are that hard.
Well, you start with really weak creatures, and you grind not just levels but gold so that you can get good equipment, and equip good equipment that complements your stats. Like me, I like to use the warrior class because I like having abilities that let me like create red skulls and +1, +2, +5, stuff like that. Stuff like that. It depends on the class, like whatever works for you. For me, like the class that I'm really good with is the warrior class in Puzzle Quest. So, like that's my thing. I will agree that the later Puzzle Quest games aren't all that good. Like Puzzle Quest 2 sucks. Galactus has moments of goodness, but the thing is like you have to really like the game in the beginning of the game is kind of easy, and then like in the second half, like in the first act of the game is kind of easy. The second act it starts to get hard, and then the third act it gets easy again. But that difficulty spike in the middle is kind of like a motherfucker to get through. But yeah. And now D3 just makes like paid microtransaction Puzzle Quest games like Marvel Puzzle Quest and Magic the Gathering Puzzle Quest, which is just fucking terrible. So yeah, I agree. Yeah, at least part of the Puzzle Quest game is not very good. Puzzle Quest series, sorry. Anyone else have a puzzle game they want to put to the list before we move on?
Let's see. I don't know if this counts as a puzzle game, but there's this game I played once called Splash.
Called what?
This game called Splash. It's this game where you had to hit the ball to hit these blocks to decipher the image that's being covered by these blocks.
Sounds like an Arkanoid clone.
Yeah, And there are like 3 phases.
Yeah, that sounds like an Arkanoid clone. A lot of games, Arkanoid itself was kind of like a cousin to Pong, so I totally get it. But yeah, you can add that to the list. Next, strategy. Simcopter, Sim Earth, Age of Empires 2, Seventh Legion, which is a shitty StarCraft clone, and Metal Marines.
Dang.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out that the strategy game that's on the SNES where you're able to move things up and down and try to do certain things.
That sounds like Metal Marines. like Metal Marines was a strategy game on the SNES where literally like you had your side, the computer had their side, and you could shoot missiles. You could send over your Metal Marines for these giant mechs. You could build certain like anti-missile defenses and lasers and defense stuff. And it was just like the game had a really cool premise, but the execution sucked, and that's why Metal Marines is kind of on this list. It's not a bad game by itself. It's just like a lot of times it's not the idea, it's not the premise behind the game. It's how it's executed. Anyone have anything else they want to add to strategy that they're like, this strategy game fucking sucks?
Nope.
All right. Now we have 2D action games. I have every Mega Man X game after 4. So Mega Man 5, X5, X6, X7. All those can eat shit and die. I hate those games.
Lion King and of all things. Oh yeah. The Animaniacs one.
What, the one for Sega Genesis or the one for the SNES?
SNES.
Oh, I gotta disagree with you on that one. That's a fun game.
Let's just say I kept on having those bad platforming moments.
The platforming isn't as good as it could be, but it's not the worst ever. Plus, that game looks so great. It's like you're playing.
It looks so good, and yet somehow for me it played badly.
Yeah, that weird isometric gameplay was kind of weird. For me, I have the Mega Man X5, X6, X7, because those games are terrible. The Strider reboot. 4 Capcom games on the 2D action platformers. Surprising, I know. The Strider reboot because they turned Strider from like a series of mini boss, a series of boss fights into this Metroidvania, and it doesn't really work. And Lemmings 2, which I know is more of a puzzle platformer, but I'm putting it on there because I just don't like. I don't like games that have fall damage that are a platformer and have fall damage, because fuck that. And now for 3D action adventure. Anyone have anything they want to add for 2D action adventure that they're like, fuck this 2D action adventure title?
No.
All right, so
I haven't played any on my SNES.
All right. So for me, it's Last of Us, because that game
for 3D platformers.
Action adventure. Sorry, it's 3D action. 2D action adventure and 3D action adventure. Last of Us, because Last of Us is just like people praise this game, but almost the entire game is one big fucking escort mission, and I hate that. And an escort mission where the AI can find your ass if you break wind loudly, but somehow the AI character's knocking over bottles, blowing shit up, talking, and they never seem to find her. With zombies that hunt by sound. Really? Fuck you. And people are like, oh, it's a good game. You must not play a lot of games.
You have a lack of taste if you say that. Because even I could see a better game in that than in Gex 3D. I mean, that's 3.
It's like someone saying, you know what, man, American cheese is the best cheese ever. Not when I say American cheese, I don't mean like American style cheese. I mean that shit that you get
The
that's not even that
processed cheddar cheese. That
no, it's not even cheese.
Slices.
It's processed milk products, right? And they're like, this is the best cheese ever. It's like, have you ever had aged cheddar? No. Have you ever had Parmesan? No.
I work with what I get, and I can say this. That I'm no expert in cheese, but there's cheese that are better than that, for sure.
I mean, have you had Gruyere, Swiss? No. Then how the fuck are you going to say this cheap-ass processed shit is the best cheese ever? It is, because it's all I've had. Well, shit, that's a bad sample size. The next one is the first Jak and Daxter, because it's just that first Jak and Daxter is so hard to get through, and the platforming is so shitty. It's so shitty. The next one is Bionic Commando, the 3D game they made in the 7th gen, where they turned Rad Spencer from this awesome 80s like over the top character into this dude brosif guy with brosif dreads and this this emo tragic story where his wife died and was turned into his bionic arm, and they turned the villain into Super Joe, who Super Joe is the guy who gives you your briefings in Bionic Commando. He also is the guy you rescue in one of the earlier Capcom games. He's like a hero, and they turn him into a villain in the reboot because no one knows how to make a good game anymore at Capcom.
Sadly.
So fuck that game. And the fact that they made a white guy with brosif dreadlocks, Rad Spencer. I'm like, seriously? That's just lame. I'm sorry. Like with brosif dreadlocks or a man bun. Fuck you with your man bun. Next. The original Spyro the Dragon. I'm sorry. I know a lot of people are going to get angry at me when I say this.
Actually, I'm wondering, where the beep did you get some liquor?
Well, I find the original Spyro the Dragon to be overrated and just not very good.
I mean, I played all 3 Spyro games, and I consider it a middle game.
Because, I mean, I'm looking at it in comparison to what it was competing against at the time. Like, what else I could have been playing. Like, the original Spyro the Dragon by itself, if all you had was a PlayStation, was a good game. But I also had an N64, so
I get you.
I could play...
It's a game. Like, it's not terrible, but it's not so good.
Like by itself, it's not a bad game. But when you compare it against Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo-Tooie, Donkey Kong 64, Jet Force Gemini...
Okay, you make your point.
Conker's Bad Fur Day. It's like, yeah, this is shit. It's kind of like this, right? It's like, think of it like this, okay? A McDonald's hamburger by itself, not that bad. But if you want to compare a McDonald's hamburger to a top-level Angus sirloin steak burger that was made with ground sirloin meat, seasoned perfectly, seared to perfection on a brioche bun with homemade mayo.
Okay, now you're just doing a multi-hit combo for the Ultra.
It makes the McDonald's burger look like shit. And that's the thing that happened with Spyro the Dragon for me. It's like everyone's like, Spyro the Dragon's a good game. The only people who say Spyro Dragon is like a really great open world game is people who had a PlayStation, didn't have an N64, and were like, I want a PlayStation. And that's their prerogative. But what you missed out on were games that were objectively on a technical level better than Spyro the Dragon.
I could say that there's games that are highly better than Spyro the Dragon. I just thought that Spyro was middleware, like.
I mean, I replayed the original Spyro, and aside from the tight control movements, it wasn't that bad.
Like I said, it's not that bad within and of itself, but when you compare it to its competition at the time, it's kind of shitty. So that being said, then we have first-person shooters, which is really easy to get through. Super Noah's Ark. It was made as a fuck you to Nintendo. Super Noah's Ark is basically a reskin of Wolfenstein 3D on the SNES because Nintendo wouldn't let them have Nazi imagery. So id Software basically leaked the code, and they turned that into Super Noah's Ark, where instead of killing Nazis, you're subduing animals with food on Noah's Ark. And it's kind of a bad game.
This was before the ESRB.
Yeah, this was before the ESRB, and Nintendo had their own internal guidelines of what could be allowed on their platform. Kind of like what Sony's trying to do right now with the PlayStation. Next, we have
at least Nintendo made sense.
Well, I mean, I'm going to keep it real. I'm kind of against censorship either way. I think people should just be realistic. Like, you know, like, because there's certain games that would allow certain subject material that would be really interesting to play, but because you have the ESRB in part of it, in the way of it, it's like you can't have games that have that type of material. So it's like it's kind of preventing it a little bit. And then you have Postal 1 and Postal 2. Once again, these are M-rated games where like the gameplay actually sucks, and the only real thing is that they have shock value. Like in Postal 1, you kill an enemy and their corpse lies there, and you can unzip your pants and see on the corpse. I mean, whatever. And you know, you can fight Gary Coleman, the security guard, and kill him.
I should mention. I don't know if you mentioned it. I should have mentioned Hatred for worst 3D action game.
Yeah, but that's more of a first-person shooter. Then you got Far Cry 1. The reason I put the first Far Cry on this list is because the first Far Cry is like it's a technical feat that you have these massive open world levels where you can do anything in order to accomplish your objective. Like they give you a suggested route, but you can go off and do other shit too, which is kind of cool. But the first Far Cry just like is a little too open almost with how you can do things, which kind of detracts from the overall gaminess of it, if you will. And finally, my number one worst first-person shooter is Doom 3. I know some people are going to get angry. They're going to be like, "How can you say what?
Where is this from?
What, Doom 3?
Doom 3.
Well, the reason Doom 3 is on the list is because Doom 1 and 2 are these awesome, badass first-person shooters where you're a space marine who basically starts out on Mars, fights your way through a portal on Mars into hell, and keeps on blowing shit up all the way into hell, killing demons and demon-possessed
all for a pet.
No, before then, he's just killing people. That's badass as fuck. Then Doom 3 says, "Oh, you know how you were badass space marine killing demons? Fuck that. This is a horror game." I'm like,
but didn't people praise Doom 3 and call it one of the best horror games?
People may have said that, but it sold the worst of thus far of the Doom games. Like it's the worst selling one. So clearly, like it kind of went against what Doom's about. Like you notice, like the Dooms they've made since then, Doom 2016, the Doom Eternal, like those two games are very back to the roots. You're a badass space marine killing demons. Great.
And barely giving that F about the story, apparently.
Well, I mean, the story is like the gates of hell have been opened, and you're a badass space marine with guns who can shoot demons. You've got guns. They're demons. They're bad guys. You shoot them. It's very simple. Very simple, very to the point. No bullshit. I like that about Doom. And then they fucked it up with, and then they're like, no, we're going to make a horror game. Now, if they want to do a Doom spinoff where you weren't a space marine, you were like someone who this shit happened to, you didn't have all that training, you're just trying to survive and get the fuck off Mars, that would be perfect for a spinoff of Doom. But as far as making that premise Doom 3, shit. No. Fuck that game. So with that being said, those are my worst games. We can go with best next. Best will be easier to get through because I'm sure we're going to have a lot of the same games. Now, the caveat for the best was you cannot have it all be Nintendo because I mean, there's certain genres that Nintendo has on fucking lockdown. So when I made this list, I really had to think about some of the games because, like I said, there's some genres Nintendo has a lock on, like 2D platformers. That could be all Nintendo games, legitimately.
And that's a hard thing to do when some of those games are pretty good.
Yeah, but I managed to do it. So let's get down to it. 2D platformers. I have Mischief Makers. It's more of an action 2D platformer, but I like that game, so I put it in 2D platformers.
I could agree with you on that because seriously, that game is criminally underrated.
Yeah, and it's from forgot the name of the studio. They're the same people who did Gunstar Heroes and Ikaruga and Alien Soldier and stuff like that. They used to work for Konami, and now they're gone. Now Treasure. It's from Treasure, and it's a really good game. Next, Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I could have put 1, but 2 has so many enhancements to the gameplay, like the spin dash and stuff like that. And kind of like the easy mode character of Miles Tails Prower, who can fly, which makes him so much more fucking useful than Sonic the Hedgehog.
I would say more content, but go ahead.
You know, and let's see what else. Bonk's Adventure. Bonk's Adventure is a really nice platformer where you play a big-headed caveman who looks like Krillin, and you headbutt enemies to kill them, which is pretty damn badass. You can also jump in the air and bonk your head on, like, press down and bonk your head on enemies in order to smash into them. And it's just a very interesting platformer. It's very different from what you'd see from a Mario title. Next, I have Rayman Legends because it's actually a pretty good game. Got it for free on PC. Been playing it. It's pretty good. Not the best game ever, but pretty damn good. I'm glad I didn't pay for it, but it's pretty good. And my number 1 2D platformer of all time, like the one that I would consider to be like the best ever that I've ever played, is Donkey Kong Country 2. Now I could have gone with Super Mario World,
or Super Mario Brothers 3,
or Super Mario Brothers 3, or any like new Super Mario Brothers Wii U, or like there's so many Nintendo titles, but I want Donkey Kong Country 2 because Donkey Kong Country 2 basically, when you compare it to what its contemporaries were at the time, is still such a good fucking game. It has a great difficulty curve. 2 characters who are different enough that they suit different gameplay styles. Great music. Great platforming. Like the platforming just feels good. It's almost rhythmic, like you're dancing. And I mean, I say it, Rare managed to one-up Nintendo because and I'm using air quotes, you can't see me, the sequel to Super Mario World is Yoshi's Island, which doesn't feel or play like a sequel to Super Mario World. Whereas the sequel to Donkey Kong Country is Donkey Kong Country 2, which feels like they said, oh, we're going to do Donkey Kong Country, but we're going to make everything better. And they did. And it's fucking awesome. So for me, that is my best 2D platform of all time. Technically a Nintendo title, kind of, sort of, but fuck it, it's the best. It is that game. That game still feels really good to play. Like I pull that game out every once in a while and just play through it, and it's fucking awesome. Anyone have any 2D platforms they want to add? They can do a Nintendo one if they want to. Super Mario World.
Well, let's see. I can mention Super Mario Brothers 3, the original Donkey Kong Country.
I'd say the Donkey Kong series entirely for me.
Yeah, I kind of had to. I couldn't go with Super Mario Brothers 3 because Super Mario Brothers 3 is really well made, but there's so many fucking useless power-ups in that game that I kind of had to be like, okay, like
clean up.
It kind of drags down the gameplay experience, like the frog suit, which is great if you're underwater, but there's only like 2 levels where you're totally underwater. So it's like you have this awesome suit that's great if you're underwater, but there's only 2 levels where you can use it. What the fuck, man?
I mean, well, there's the Tanuki suit and the Hammer Bros suit.
Yeah, the Hammer Bros suit, which is great when you're facing enemies that are airborne above you. There's also, I think, in the Game Boy Advance re-release of Super Mario Brothers 3, there's also fucking the Fireball suit and the Boomerang Brothers suit. The Fireball Brothers suit and the Boomerang suit. And they're awesome, but the thing is like those suits are so difficult to control and utilize that you're probably going to use it for like maybe a quarter of a level and then get hit and lose it. And you're like, fuck, well, that was interesting. And that kind of brings down the whole experience.
And there's Yoshi's Island.
I'm never gonna say that's a good 2D platformer. You'll never hear me say that. I will never cop to that. I will never cop to that plea. I will never admit that is a good. I mean, it's not the word, but I'll never put it.
There's Sonic 3 and Knuckles.
Okay, I'll give it to you. Next, let's move to 3D platformers. I have Super Mario Brothers. Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2. I'm including that as one game because 2 is almost like an expansion of the first one. Not really like a totally different game. It's like the same engine, same gameplay mechanics, just more. And to me, those are like the best, but here's some other good ones. Yes. I consider Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 better than Odyssey. I do. I'm sorry. I know some people are going to get angry, but fuck it. It's my list. Next, we have Sonic Lost World. I like Sonic Lost World. I thought that was the direction that Sonic should have been going, and then Sega got scared and made that new Sonic game, Elite Forces, which is just trash. It's like Sega doesn't know how to make a 3D Sonic game. Although, if you ask me, they've never had a clue how to make a 3D Sonic game.
I was going to say, the last clue that I think they had that was a good Sonic 3D game was Sonic Heroes. And that's pushing it.
And then we have Ratchet & Clank 2, a.k.a. Ratchet & Clank Going Commando. That game is so much fun. It's so much fun. It's so much fun. Just the sheer amount of shit you can do in that game is great. Then I have my next one is Conker's Bad Fur Day.
That I can agree with you on because seriously, it's humor, it's mind bending, and it's actually fun.
Yeah, that game is a great platformer. The platforming isn't perfect, but it's like you don't mind because the game's sense of humor and just interesting characters, like that box is like, I say, get this big bitch off of me. and
it makes sense because, well, it's not offensive in looks department, and it makes sense because you're doing a puzzle.
And then you've got the king bee who got kicked out of his hive, and he pollinates.
And he needs to tap some flour.
Yeah. and it's I mean the film is just like the game is just so much fun. And there's so much stuff in this. I mean, the music is great, like the soprano or Rock Solid. And the puns, it's like, oh, he's a boiler. He's got balls of brass.
Polished to the nth degree.
Yeah. And the gear who's like, yeah, put those gears on my shaft. And it turns out the big gear is gay. like when you flip the gear under like his underside, he's gay. so it's like they gotta switch it. The game is just really good. And so for me, that's one of my favorite 3D platformers.
Great. It reminds me of some of those comedy moments.
yeah. Soprano.
I used to
know that song by heart. And I know parts of it still. That movie is that game is so fucking good. So anyone want to add a 3D platformer to the list?
Let's see. There's Odyssey, Banjo-Tooie.
Yeah, I didn't put Banjo. I could have put any of the Rare games, but I chose Conker's Bad Fur Day because its sense of humor was so Like it was crude, but there was also some really clever stuff in there.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I was going to put Banjo-Tooie on the list too because I was actually able to complete it and be able to work through its annoying puzzles.
I mean, hell, I could have put Donkey Kong Country on there just because of that DK rap with Cranky scratching on that turntable. Take it to the fridge, Cranky.
And the original Sonic Adventure game.
Oh hell no! Nope, not best. That should never be considered one of the best 3D platformers ever made. I could put Super Mario 64 on 3D platformers, but that's too easy, you know? Because everyone's always like, Super Mario 64, it's a great 3D platformer. It's pretty good. Nintendo got better. Like I said, I personally think Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 are better 3D platformers. Even than Odyssey, because Odyssey still suffers from the camera control, whereas Mario Galaxy figured out how to not have the camera be as obtrusive because you're on little planetoids, so the camera's always pulled out and not fucking making you die from missing jumps or missing stars or coins or whatever.
And Crash 2, Cortex Strikes Back. Easily the best of the trilogy, the Crash trilogy.
Is that a 3D platformer though? Isn't that more of a 2.5D?
I mean, it's supposed to be 3D.
Yeah, they market it that way, but is it really? Like when you compare it to other 3D platformers of the time, like is it 3D like Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo-Tooie? No.
I mean, you're stuck on one linear path.
Yeah, so that's not 3D. It's they marketed it as 3D, but it's kind of like how they marketed Donkey Kong Country as 3D technology when it was really just a 2D game with 3D rotoscoping for the character models, which was cool, but that's not 3D, but whatever. Let's move on to JRPGs. The first one.
Final Fantasy 6 would probably be easy enough.
Say it with me. Chrono Trigger.
I thought you would say Final Fantasy 6 or Chrono Trigger.
Final Fantasy 6 is not on the list. No, wait. No, I lied. That's the next one. Final Fantasy 6. The next
you beeping troll.
Paper Mario Thousand Year Door. I love that game. It's really fucking good. Lufia 2. Lufia 2.
I'd say Grandia 2 for me.
Lufia 2 took everything that was great about the first Lufia and basically said, we can do better. Like, it has better graphics. The dungeons are more intense. The puzzle solving in the dungeons is more intense. The enemies are more intense. The music is more intense. The story is deeper. There's more shit going on. It's basically, don't let the cutesy looking graphics fool you. Lufia 2 has a very mature and deep, dark story, but with these anime looking chibi characters. It's weird, but awesome at the same time.
And I just remembered, for those who like Breath of Fire, I'd say Breath of Fire 3 might be here, but
yeah,
please.
I could have put, like, I could have made this a 10 and put Breath of Fire 3 and 2 on there. Like, I could have put a lot more games on here, but I'm just using the JRPGs that, in my opinion, best exemplify a JRPG. And like, they're a Japanese game, they're an RPG, and they're just really, really fucking good. Breath of Fire 3 is good, but there's aspects of it that aren't perfect. Like I'm not gonna get too much into it. And the last game I have on my list is Radiant Historia. That game is so good.
And this is something I can fully agree with Red Fox, even though I'm playing Perfect Chronology.
Yeah, Radiant Historia is basically like, it's basically a Chrono Trigger sequel done on a budget where they couldn't get as much content into it as a Chrono Trigger, but they still managed to give you a full story with a lot of different branching paths and shit going on. And that is awesome. And it shows how, like, budget should not constrain gameplay design. Which tells me, when I hear that people say, well, JRPGs are too expensive to make, no, your dumbass doesn't know how to make a good one on a budget. It has nothing to do with how much money you have. It's that you don't have the
Thank you, Mr. Spicy.
There you go. So anyone want to add a JRPG to the list? I know Joel read Breath of Fire 3.
I'll also put in Pokemon Black and White too.
You know what? I'm gonna let you have it because it's your list, it's your opinion, and it's subjective. But
this is the reason why I was trying to keep away from Pokemon, because I know what Mr. Red Fox is going to say.
I'm not even going to touch it.
I was debating whether or not I should mention it, but
no, go ahead. It's your list.
And then probably the original Xenoblade Chronicles.
I mean, it's your list.
I'm iffy of putting Xenoblade on the list for
the first Xenoblade Chronicles is more of a technical marvel that they were able to put a game of that size. On the Wii on one disc. That was amazing. I wouldn't even consider it to be the best work that they've done. Like I think on a technical level, Xenoblade Chronicles X is more impressive than Xenoblade Chronicles 1 or 2. But it's your list.
And Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep.
That's not even an RPG, man. Come on.
I just had to recoil. Because seriously.
That's an action adventure game with RPG elements. But
then I guess I should have mentioned that for later when we reach into action adventure.
That's your list. So now let's move on to Western RPGs. I think this is more my list because I know you guys don't play a lot of those. Anachronox.
Take the floor.
Yeah, Anachronox, which is a game made by a guy who worked at Eidos Interactive. Anachronox is basically, this guy said, I want to make a JRPG. So basically, it's a JRPG with Western sensibilities. So like, it's not like, dudes who look like girls with big ass swords who are compensating for the fact that they may be gay by carrying a huge sword. Anachronox, like the beginning of the game has one of the best openings ever. This guy is getting the shit kicked out of him by this midget loan shark, who then throws him out of the window of his own office that's on the top floor of a bar, and he falls down to the floor. And the guy's like, "Well, next time have the money, or we're gonna throw you off a ledge and not out the window." It's just like, God damn. And even though the graphics of the game aren't that good, just how it captures how this guy looks while he's getting his ass kicked, and how when the dwarf looks at the window and then looks at him, and he looks at the window and he looks at the dwarf, he's like shaking his head like, please don't do this. The game just starts off great and then it just gets better from there. So yeah, it's a Western RPG and it's fucking awesome. If you ever get a chance to play it on PC, it's an older game, so if you have a shitty PC or a shitty desktop or a shitty laptop, you can still play it. And it's really good. Next one, Dragon Age Origins. It's a really good game. I think one of the last truly good RPGs that came from BioWare. Vampire the Masquerade. It's a really good game. It's made by Troika Studios, which was made up of half of the people who left Vigil Interactive. Vigil Interactive are the people who originally made Fallout back in the day. So you're getting quality. And technically, it would have been the first game to be made in the Source engine, but because of issues, it's the second game to be made in the Source 2.0 engine. So it's buggy and glitchy because the team was working with a new engine. But if you can get the unofficial patch for the game that basically fixes a lot of issues they weren't able to get out because, Troika was always one flop away from bankruptcy. It's a really good game. Fallout 2, which is a really good game. It expands upon what you had in the original Fallout, but it's better because it's like 100 years after the events of the original Fallout, or no, like 50. And, you see how civilization in some places devolved, but how some places people are still moving forward, trying to maintain and recreate society. And finally, Fallout New Vegas. I like that game. I could have put KOTOR 2. I didn't because, like, going back and playing the original KOTOR, it's a very easy, safe story. The main point of the story is telegraphed from a mile away, and I hate that. So, and KOTOR 2 is better, but once again, it was made by Obsidian, where they were under a deadline. They had to get that game. They had to get the game out in a year, so it literally had like 9 months of development. And when it came out, it was a buggy, glitchy mess. You can get it now with a lot of upgrades and content stuff that makes it a better experience. But yeah, I could only put one game that was that broken on the list, and that was Vampire the Masquerade. Anyone want to add anything to the Western RPG thing before we move on to the next one?
The floor is yours, really.
All right. Fighting games.
This is a tricky one. Killer Instinct.
Killer Instinct is on the list. Yes. That's number 2.
I put Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo.
No. Street Fighter 2 is on here, but it's the New Challengers, because the New Challengers is like the best one for the SNES. It's really good. It has all the new characters. It's got T-Hawk. It's got Fei Long.
Yeah, but Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo has those new challengers plus Akuma.
No, it doesn't. Oh.
I was gonna say that Street Fighter, Killer Instinct,
Smash Brothers Brawl.
I was gonna say, I thought you were gonna say Melee, because I was gonna fight you for that.
No. Melee is not a bad game, but Brawl one-ups it. Like, the only reason for me, because Brawl had a kick-ass single player. Like, Melee single player was okay, but Brawl single player blew it out the fucking water. And any fighting game where I can sit down and play it and I don't have to have a whole bunch of people over to my house playing it with me and I can still have a ton of fun, I'm giving it kudos. Speaking of games that have awesome single players where I can play by myself and have a ton of fun, Soul Calibur 2, the GameCube version, because it had Link in it.
Soul Calibur 2 and 3 for me, because I actually had fun with those.
And Mortal Kombat 9?
Nope, Mortal Kombat's not on this list. It's on the list of worst games.
Okay, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 then.
Nope. Guilty Gear. Basically, everyone keeps on saying Marvel vs. Capcom, but if you play Guilty Gear, especially the early ones, like the 2D early ones that are with the cells, that's basically the same engine as you have in Marvel vs. Capcom 1 or 2.
I was going to say, I used Guilty Gear X2 for that.
Yeah, I use Guilty Gear, just generally like the early Guilty Gears, because there's like 3 characters I'm good with using in Guilty Gear. Like, I can use all of them, but like I'm really good with Soul Bad Guy, Chip Zanoff, and Faust. I'm really good with those characters. I can kick people's asses with those characters.
You picked a weird one with Faust.
Well, because Faust is tricky. Like, he's really, really tricky, but once you get used to him, you can kick ass and take names. Soul Bad Guy is basically the Ryu of the game, though. He's just...
I get you. I was just saying that Faust is the one that always... I could never fight him without having a bad laugh fit.
Yeah, he's kind of he's a tricky character. You've got to learn how to use Faust, but once you get used to him, he's really easy to get to.
Yeah.
Anyone want to add anything to the fighting game scene?
I said Killer Instinct. I say what was it? Yeah, Guilty Gear. Well, personally, Guilty Gear X2. And I would say the Smash Brothers series.
Let's see. For me, Killer Instinct, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, and let's see, one more, Dragon Ball Fighters.
Yeah, I didn't know. Anyway, next we have beat 'em ups, best beat 'em ups. Final Fight, just the original Final Fight. Any way you get it, arcade, SNES port, Genesis port, Sega CD port, Final Fight 1, the port on the Game Boy Advance. All of them are equally good. Double Dragon, Return of Double Dragon, It's the SNES game that's basically like the fourth in the series, and it's really good. I have another game on here. It's Double Dragon Advance. It's basically a redo of. It's a remake of the original Double Dragon, but it has like sensibilities combined from Super Double Dragon, aka Return of Double Dragon, and some of the later games. But it looks great. Plays really well. It has great music, different playable characters, and it's amazing what they were able to pull out. What Technos was able to pull out of the little Game Boy Advance. And like people say the sound chip for the Game Boy Advance sucked, but like when someone knew what they were doing with that sound chip, they could make some awesome music with it. Like go listen to any of the Golden Sun shit. Fucking awesome. That's Game Boy Advance music. And then I have Yakuza 2 /3. It's the same engine for all three games, but 2 and 3 are really good. So. And Kunio-kun, aka River City Ransom, because it's another Technos beat 'em up that's more like it's like a beat 'em up RPG hybrid, because you get experience, you get money to buy food, which gives you experience. You can buy new moves to kick people's ass, to beat 'em ups, to drop more money, so you can buy better shit. It's nice. Anything they want to add to beat 'em ups? Golden Axe.
Let's see. 3 of them are made by Konami: Turtles in Time, The Simpsons game, and X-Men.
Yeah, I could have put that on there, but I didn't.
Those are nostalgia trips, and I think Red Fox missed those.
No, I could have.
And of course, Alien vs. Predator.
Yeah, I think I was gonna put AVP on there. No, I think AVP is on here. Alien vs. Predator. But that never came to a home console, and now that Capcom's releasing their little mini arcade system, it's going to have AVP on there. I might get it depending on the price, just because it has AVP on there.
I'm going to say this. I hope that you get it for a good price, because I see Capcom having such a big ego trip with this little system.
If it's like $89, that's cool. If it's more than that, like 89, if it's under 100, I'll get it. If it's
the Capcom Home Arcade costs $200.
Well,
hell no!
Fuck that system.
This is the reason why I say that Capcom has an ego problem.
Yeah, this is why I said, if it's under 100, I'll get it. If it's 200, then fuck that system. Anyway, no, I didn't put Turtles in. I didn't put the Turtles games because there's so many of them. I would have dominated the list, because then it's hard to pick one. But if I had to pick one Turtles game that I would have put on the list, I would say Turtles in Time, because Turtles in Time is just.
It's a blast.
Yeah, that game is so much fun.
Right.
Like, it's better than the first Turtles. Even though the first Turtles is iconic and it has that music that I grew up with, the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles tune, which no animated series has had a tune as good as that one.
Yeah. And, Mr. Red, mind if I rewind a little? Because I remember the fighting game that actually was kind of good, and then I had a bad version of it. Tournament Fighters, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Well, the good one was on the SNES because it was just a Street Fighter clone. The bad one was on the Sega Genesis because Sega.
Oh god.
Well, the problem with the Sega Genesis was that it was made to compete against the NES, and Sega built that thing around their hardware and not thinking about other people that wanted to push it, which is why that whole three button controller thing bit them in the ass when fighting games came along later. Next we have racing games.
Diddy Kong Racing. I'm going to get that one before you do, Red.
Yeah, that's my number one racing game. My next one is Top Gear Rally, the series entirely. I love that series. Crash Team Racing. Yeah, I know people are like, you're a Nintendo fanboy. I like Crash Team Racing.
I'm saying this right now. Crash Team Racing, it never left a good impression for me. I put that towards the worst area.
For me, it's one of the best because it's basically like a lesser version of Diddy Kong Racing with characters that I give less of a shit about. But then again, most of the characters in Diddy Kong Racing I don't give a shit about. Like, I like Diddy Kong, Timber was cool. Bumper was cool. Banjo was okay. I like Drumstick. I thought he was kind of cool. And I like Tip Tup and Pipsy because Pipsy had like really fucking high acceleration. Next, we have Daytona USA. Now, this racing game isn't that great, but I like the music. Yeah, that dude who sings it, who like was like the music guy for Sega for a while, that dude's so fucking enthusiastic. It's like, Daytona! Like, dude, you're really excited to say Daytona, dude. I'm with you, man. Daytona, yeah.
If anything, that's what happens when you put effort into your job.
He's also the guy who sang the main song for Burning Rangers, and he's just as enthusiastic. Yeah, you're firefighters, Burning Rangers. I mean, that song is just awesome. Just if you guys get a chance, go on YouTube and look it up. It's fucking awesome. It's an awesome thing. Phantasy Star 4, Shining Force, All Scenarios, Lunar Silver Star Story from Area 73. I agree with you with Phantasy Star 4 and Shining Force 3, but Lunar, that game can eat a bag of dicks. I hate the Lunar games. But anyway, those are all RPGs. But let's see what else. My last on this list is Cruisin' USA / Cruisin' Exotica. Now I could have put Extreme G2 on here. I could have put like a lot of racing games because there's a lot of racing games on the system. But on this, like I could have put F-Zero. But the thing about F-Zero is that the first F-Zero is just a fucking tech demo for Mode 7. It's a good tech demo, but it's a tech demo, and I can't give best game when at the end of the day, it's one big, huge tech demo. So that's why you won't see Pilot Wings or the original F-Zero or anything like that. And I finally pinpointed why I really don't like Breath of the Wild, because it's one big, huge tech demo for their new physics engine. That's why I'm really not enthused about that game.
The original Star Fox is a tech demo.
I know, but that had solid gameplay behind it. Breath of the Wild doesn't even feel like a Legend of Zelda game. I mean, you know, if it was a tech demo for something that wasn't an established franchise, you know, it's kind of like if someone used you as a guinea pig for a new sandwich. You're like, yeah, I want a new burger, and you're expecting it to be a burger with, like, you know, a bun, mayo, lettuce, tomato, you know, a patty, and they're like, no, it's a cabbage leaf with some with a mushroom, with a raw mushroom in the middle of it. That's the burger. It's like, this is nice, but I wanted a burger, goddammit, not your experiment.
I was gonna say that's a vegan burger, and I don't do vegan.
Yeah, that might be good, but I came here for a certain thing. I expect a certain thing. I don't want to be your fucking guinea pig, and I don't appreciate that. Anyway, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway,
who's on?
No, that's Pinky. It's not bad. So next we have. No, that's okay.
Okay, you go on.
No, that's okay. So then we have sports. Sports games should be pretty easy. It's NBA Jam. I mean, come on, man. It's NBA Jam. It's got.
I was gonna say Blitz. Yeah, and Blitz, NBA Jam.
But NBA Jam, look, it has one of the best announcers of all time. Boom! Shakalaka! He's on fire!
Yes. Good
man. I'm telling you right now, if you could get, like, seriously, if that guy patented his voice and you could get him to be like the narrator of your life, that would be fucking awesome. Boom, shakalaka, it's over. He's going downtown. Anyway, so then we got Tecmo Bowl. Yes, for me, the Tecmo Bowl series is the best football game, like bar none. Aside from, like, it's the best. Like like the three Tecmo Bowl games shit on whatever EA's been making for years now. Then I have Super Dodgeball.
How old is that game? Just wondering because
there's Tecmo Bowl 2, and then there's Tecmo Super Bowl, which is for the Super Nintendo, and all of them are good. Like all of them are really
that's the thing. Because if Techno Super Bowl is the last great game and it still can beat every EA game that came after it.
Well, the reason I like Tecmo Bowl is because Tecmo Bowl is fun.
Yeah.
It's easy to get into. It's easy. Like Tecmo Bowl is easy to get into. You don't have to have a PhD in fucking statistics and how to learn how to use these complicated ass controls. Tecmo Bowl is easy to get into. You can still juke the AI so you can run around them and get these high scoring games like 63-7. It's awesome. I love. And
I was about to say you actually 63. You actually 63-7 these guys.
Oh yeah. I destroy.
You must have.
I love Tecmo Bowl, and it's a sports game.
Say, you must have made somebody cry. You must have made the AI cry.
I've beaten people. I've beaten people in Tecmo Bowl like that. I have kicked people's ass in Tecmo Bowl. I'm good at it. And finally, Power Pro Kun. Power Pro Kun is the baseball game made by Konami. I know people are going to get angry about this because how dare you put a Konami game?
I was going to say, Konami actually made a sports game.
Well, it uses super deformed players so they can get around not having to pay licenses for people. And it's got a little RPG thing where you can have a little starter player and you go through their story, you do events and training to raise their stats. And then basically you try to get them recruited to go into baseball. And the better they play, the longer they play, the more money they get, the better their legacy is. And then you can retire the player and then have their kid who inherits some of their stats to go into baseball too. So it becomes this big, huge thing. There's like 3 of them, and I've got all of them that were brought over. I've got the 2 for the Wii and 1 for the Wii U. And I fucking love the Power Pro Kun games. I wish I could get more, but they're in Japanese and I can't read Japanese. So.
Of course.
That raises some questions. Do kids actually inherit parents' strengths and weaknesses in real life, like in games?
I was gonna say,
but not like not. If your parents are really intelligent, you're not going to inherit what they know. You might inherit, if it's a genetic thing, you might inherit the disposition to be good at certain, intelligence-based things. But it's not like Pokemon where you can inherit abilities and shit. Next, we have Puzzle Quest. The puzzle section. I have Tetris Attack. Tetris Attack is Nintendo's take on Tetris. It's the one that in Japan it was called Pound Upon. But in America, they just reskinned it and added Yoshi characters into it. Now, I know this is going to sound weird, but the one for the SNES is good. But the best one, in my opinion, is the one for the Game Boy that was done by HAL Laboratories. And do you know who the lead programmer for this game was?
Oh boy,
Satoru Iwata. So this is a really good Tetris game. It's got a lot of content. It's got great music. It's got a lot of Yoshi characters. Yoshi, Lakitu, Poochie, Gargantua Blarg, Raphael Raven, some weird butterfly creature.
I was going to say, Puzzle League is also known as Tetris Attack, and I actually love both because it really things up with.
Puzzle League for the N64 is what they did, because basically in Japan it's called Panel Upon, and then when they brought it over to America, they just put something else on it and reskinned it. So in the 4th gen it was Tetris Attack, Tetris Attack with Yoshi, and then in the 5th gen when it was Tetris Attack for the N64, it was Pokemon Puzzle League.
Yeah, and Puzzle League kind of stuck as far as the name goes since.
Yeah, they're still using Pokemon Puzzle League. I kind of was not with it with Pokemon Puzzle League because like I said, I'm not a huge fan of most of the Pokemon spinoffs. So I was like, if I have to see that little fucker Pikachu one more time, I'm just gonna.
So, if anything, there's one thing I really have to complain about is that if they're going to give you multiple characters and yet don't have them have some kind of powers with what you're using on the game board?
Yeah, they really. That's the thing. In Panel to Pond, the different characters had different abilities. Like they could do different things. In Puzzle and in the when they brought it over to America, they basically evened them out. So they had no special abilities, which kind of sucked. But what are you gonna do? Next, I have the Puzzle Quest, the first one, not the second one, just the first one. Arkanoid, Pipe Dreams, and Chip's Quest. That's it.
That's a small list, but I agree. I could work with you on that.
And next we have Strategy, StarCraft, The First Age of Empires, Civilization.
I was going to say Warcraft, but I'm not sure which one to use.
The thing is, like, I like Warcraft, but the thing is that Warcraft is kind of like superficial compared to StarCraft, in my opinion, because StarCraft just kind of like has a little bit more depth than Warcraft did.
I was saying I was going to use both, but yeah. Sure.
But yeah, StarCraft, the first StarCraft, fucking awesome. Age of Empires, awesome. Civilization, any of them are pretty damn good. SimCity 2000, I love that game. I have that game for the SNES. It was called SimCity for the SNES, but it basically was an enhanced port of SimCity 2000. I like that game because one of the disasters you can get is Bowser destroying your city, which is just hilarious.
I was going to say, how the heck did Bowser get there?
I have no idea, but it's fucking awesome. And then The Sims, because I used to love The Sims before EA ruined it with their fucking aggressive microtransactions and money hatting and always online. Because one of the fun things in The Sims was entering in cheats to give yourself all the money in the world and then basically torturing your Sims, like putting a pool in the back and then getting rid of the ladder so they can't get out of the pool. So then they swim forever until they get tired and die. Or locking them in a bathroom so that they just go to the bathroom and they can't get out and they just stay there and they die in a room of shit. It's terrible, but also kind of funny. So yeah, I'm sorry. Listen, I never pulled the wings off of flies or bees or anything like that. I never tortured ants, but man, is it fun fucking with Sims. Yeah, I know some people are gonna get mad, but fuck it. It's just bits of code, and they aren't even sentient. So there. Anyone want to add anything to the strategy category?
Let's see. There's Roller Coaster Tycoon.
That's a really good game, and I should have put it on the list, but there was other games on there. So, unfortunately. It's pretty good, though.
And Zoo Tycoon.
That's good, yeah. So let's move on to 2D action adventure. Metroid Zero Mission. Now, I know some people are going to say Super Metroid or Metroid Fusion or, Metroid 2 Samus Returns, the original or the reboot, the remake. I went with Zero Mission because Zero Mission basically got the benefit of being the third of the, coming after Metroid Fusion, but being a remake of the first game. So it got all the extra benefits of having all of people figuring out more about how to do better game design and stuff like that while staying true to the core of the Metroid franchise. And it shows because it has all those extras, like you can grab a ledge, pull your stuff on a ledge, and it's it's got moves that you never had in the original Metroid game. So overall, it's pretty damn good. Plus, it introduced Zero Suit Samus, so that's cool. Rocket Knight Adventures, great game, mascot action adventure game. It's got a possum with a sword and armor and a jetpack. What's not to? I mean, it's already the fact that they have a protagonist who has a jetpack and a sword and a little suit, and he's fighting in like a steampunk world. That's so awesome. It's a shame that this series only had 3 games.
And one of them was a was to try to revive it.
Yeah, and it was not very good because it was like 2.5D, and it just like if you're gonna do a sequel to Rocket Knight, it needs to be cell shaded like the originals were, not this 2.5D shit. I'm tired of people trying to cram look. 2.5D doesn't work unless you really know what you're doing. Finally, the first Guacamelee. I love that game. I think it's really well made. Like the controls are kind of stiff, but once you get used to how to use the moves and special abilities and how the gameplay system works, it's really good. Next, I have The Swindle. It's a game where you play a thief trying to make enough money to upgrade your airship enough to where you can destroy this machine that the police have that will basically put the entire city of an alternate steampunk London, so that as a thief you can't make your job, you can't break in anymore or anything like that. This is to help you prevent that thing from going off so that you can do what you do. And it's a nice little game. And finally, the Ninja Gaiden trilogy. I couldn't pick just one, so I went with the SNES game that's kind of rare that has all 3 games. So Ninja Gaiden trilogy is my those are all of my best 2D action adventure games. Anyone have anything they want to add to the action adventure title?
Let's see. There's Super Castlevania 4.
Iffy.
I would put that more as a platformer, but it's your list. You can do whatever you want to.
Oh, I thought when I think of platformers, I think of something more in the lines like Mario or DK and Yoshi's Island.
The reason I consider it more of a platformer,
where it's more focused on jumping rather than action.
Yeah, but there are some tricky ass jumps in Super Castlevania 4 where you have to jump and you have to be proper in how you're jumping and stuff like that. As a matter of fact, Super Castlevania 4 is more about how you jump than almost any other Castlevania game, 2D Castlevania game. Before they went to, we're just gonna add RPG elements to this shit. Anyone have anything else they want to add to best 2D action platformers before we move on to 3D action adventure?
Oh, let's see, Mega Man 2.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, that's good. I didn't put any of the Mega Mans on here because I mean, there's so many Mega Mans. Which one? I'd have to select some of the good ones, like Mega Man X1, really fucking good. You put it on the list.
Surprised that you didn't go for Mega Man as a series or 2 or 3.
Because there's some trash in there too, so I can't.
Yeah,
I can't.
But here's the thing. The thing is that you could say that overall that they're good, but you could say that there's some trash in there too.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's see. There's 11 Mega Man games. There's 8 X games, right? Mega Man X games? Or 7?
Mm-hmm.
8 or 7? It's 8, right?
Yeah. There's 8 Mega Man X's, and there's now 11 Mega Man games.
So of those 11, I would say 7 of the Mega Man games, the proper Mega Man games, are really good. They range from being good to really good. Then you've got 4 that are like mediocre to bad. Then on the X side, it's a little bit different because there's 4 Mega Man X games that are really good, and then there's 4 that are like. There's like 2 that are mediocre, and then there are 2 that are just trash and need to be thrown out of an airlock. So, yeah. Let's move on. So this is the 3D action adventure. We have Darksiders, Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess, Psychonauts, Jak and Daxter 3, and Billy Hatcher for my list. I went with Darksiders because it's basically. The first Darksiders is basically what if like people say you can't do a 3D Castlevania game, Darksiders is how you do a 3D Castlevania game, and it works. Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess, I like that game because of just the idea, the scope, the story, the epicness of the title. It's just so fucking awesome. Psychonauts, the gameplay mechanic, it's basically a modern adventure game, except it's an action adventure game, but it takes the concepts of, games made by LucasArts back in the day, like Monkey Island and Day of the Tentacle and stuff like that, and it's basically it brings it to a modern age in a cool way. Like it doesn't feel like it's being patronizing about it. Jak and Daxter 3, I just like the open world aspect of it and how you could jack vehicles and drive around doing stuff in the city. That was cool. And finally, Billy Hatcher. I thought that had they taken that mechanic and applied it to a Sonic game, you probably could have done an open world 3D Sonic game, but Sega's stupid. So, and this was the last game Yuji Naka made under Sega. So, and it's a good game. It's like, had they taken that concept and said, hey, now we know how to make a 3D Sonic the Hedgehog. Nope. We're going to make Sonic 06. Anyone have anything they want to add 3D action adventure? I know someone's going to say Breath of the Wild, and someone's going to say...
I was going to mention that.
This is the time when you would have to say Kingdom Hearts.
Kingdom Hearts 2 then. Birth by Sleep. Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep.
This is time for Kingdom Hearts because it's action.
Then Jak 3.
Yeah, Jak and Daxter. I could have put Ratchet and Clank on here, but Ratchet and Clank, like I said, is more of a platformer than it is an action adventure title, even though there is lots of action. Finally, we have the first-person shooter, the best first-person shooters. I've got Doom, the first Doom, Metroid Prime 3. I know.
Wolfenstein.
I don't have Wolfenstein on there. I have Serious Sam 1 just because it's a little bit different. It's different. It's like because Doom is a corridor shooter. Duke Nukem is kind of a corridor shooter. Not quite, but kind of close. But Serious Sam is not a corridor shooter. Like it's an arena shooter. Like you go into an area, you're in an arena, and then you're overwhelmed by like the whole point of Serious Sam is that you always feel like, oh shit, I'm about to be overwhelmed. You're never quite overwhelmed, but you're always close. And as long as you're playing to the right level of potential, of competence, you always feel slightly overwhelmed. Like, oh shit, these dudes are about to kill me, but not quite. And Serious Sam really hits that. Finally, Shadow Warrior, because any game that has a character named Lo Wang who just talks mad shit, they couldn't handle the Wang. My name is Lo Wang. Shadow Warrior was made in the same engine as Duke Nukem 3D, which is the last game on my list. I chose first-person shooters that kind of subverted the genre a little bit because, I didn't do Wolfenstein because Wolfenstein, while it is good for the time, is technically it's kind of basic. Like it's like a basic first-person shooter, and it advanced so much beyond that. It's like I would never say that the best 2D platformer of all time is Super Mario Brothers for the NES. It's a good game, but it's not even the best Mario game, 2D Mario game. And that's kind of like how I feel with Wolfenstein because there's so many games that came after Wolfenstein that are better than Wolfenstein. Wolfenstein may have laid the first tracks down on the rails, but so many other games went so much farther. So Wolfenstein 3D is not on the list. Duke Nukem 3D is, though, because it's got Duke Nukem, who is just so much fun. It's a shame that Gearbox fucked up that game, that character. Anyway, last we've got we've got oddball games, the best oddball games. These are games that kind of don't fit in either one category. They're hybrids. I've got Brutal Legend because it's a strategy game that masquerades as an action adventure game, but it's a strategy game. Dark Cloud, it's a RPG strategy action game, roguelike dungeon crawler. Sigma Star Saga, it's an RPG Legend of Zelda overhead view RPG horizontal shoot 'em up with spaceships. Soul Saga, which is a RPG dating sim.
Did I hear that right?
Yeah, Soul Saga is an RPG dating sim where you play a blacksmith who's a soul blacksmith who has the ability to make all types of weapons. But as a soul blacksmith, you have to combine your powers with the various women that you date in the game in order to make progressively more powerful items so that you can get through the enemies. so that's why it's a dating sim. It's also an RPG, but it's also a dating sim, and you have to take the dating sim seriously because you have to.
Sounds like Honey Pop.
No, it's not Honey Pop because it's not explicit. It's
I just had to wonder what the F did I just listen to? Because
Honey Pop is explicit. This game isn't really explicit. It's more like PG-13 romance, not like Honey Pop, which is just straight up fucking. Okay, and finally we have the last game, which is Rez. Rez is a music third-person shooter, but it's also an art game, and it's really fun to play. But it's just like, what the fuck, man?
You might need some heavy doses of your favorite inebriation beverage for that.
It's a fun game. It's like if you like Rez is a game if you want to feel like you've taken acid or LSD, but you don't actually want to take acid or LSD. Rez is for you.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That you might need your favorite sense prohibiting beverage to try to fully understand that.
That's right. So there we go. That's the best and the worst. Anything you guys want to add before we pimp out what we got to pimp out and then wrap things up? Because we went a little bit over, but whatever, fuck it.
Whether it's any other oddball games or any video game news that happened this week so far.
Well, I mean, we have some big video game news that came out, but we're going to cover it Saturday because I knew there was going to be kind of a long cast because best and the worst, and it was a long list because I had to literally go and make 5 for each category, and it's hard because there's so many games. And all of these I've actually played, so it's like, oh shit, I gotta go back into my memories and look in my library of games, stuff like that. So anyway, I guess I'll pimp out what I'm going to pimp out. This Saturday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we will be covering the Smash 3.0 update. We will be covering news of the PS5. I will probably have a review for Hellboy.
We'll see when it comes out.
No, it's already out.
I mean, when your review of it comes out.
Oh no! I'm gonna do the review on the podcast, or I might do the review and just do like the non-spoiler review, like do a non-spoiler review before the podcast is in a video, and then do the spoiler review during the podcast. Either way, you'll hear about the movie. What else? That's it. And let's see. I have a video I've been working on about what I would envision a union for the video game developers and coders would look like an ideal union, because the way these people are being overworked and screwed over, they definitely need something. So look forward to that as well. Anything you guys want to pimp out before we wrap things up?
Well, I just recently posted a new article a few days ago, which is called "When Satire Becomes Gospel." So yeah, I finally posted something of my own words rather than the usual news articles I found or trailers or usual gaming YouTubers I want to share.
All right, so here we go. That's the end of the podcast. Thank you. Rate, comment, share, subscribe. You can reach me at mrredfoxbsbusters@gmail.com or at Twitter at Matthew Wesley, mrredfox91. So there you go. Peace. Good night, and arrivederci. And
hype responsibly.